Let's bring in Tomi Lahren, host of No Interruption on Fox Nation, and Geraldo Rivera, Fox News correspondent at large.
Hi,
welcome to both of you. Hi. Thanks for being here. This is a horrific situation, and every weekend we see more shootings across the nation. So today, moments ago in the White House briefing room, Jen Psaki was asked, what's the president's reaction to this? He hasn't talked about it a whole lot, and here's what she said.
I'm not going to get ahead of his comments or remarks later this week, but it is an area where the president feels a great deal of the crime we're seeing as a result of gun violence. You can expect he'll speak to that and his commitment to continuing to address gun violence and gun safety in the country.
All right, so apparently we're going to hear something from the president on this, and I would just mention before going to you both, Keisha Bottoms, the mayor in Atlanta, said, you know, it's partly just a COVID reopening problem because she says her city reopened too soon, and that's the reason that they're seeing so much crime. Tomi, what do you say?
How blissfully ignorant are these Democrats? They blame our Second Amendment rights, law-abiding Americans who exercise their Second Amendment rights, going after gun control, talking about guns, and then they go after a reopening, allowing businesses and allowing people to go on and live their normal lives. They blame those two factors, but they don't blame the defund the police movement that the Democrats have been placating for the last year and a half or more in these cities led by Democrats that have defunded or otherwise reallocated or shorted their police departments. That's where you're seeing homicides rise. That's where you're seeing a culture of lawlessness. There's a certain segment of Americans who have watched this unfold. They know that there are no consequences. If consequences exist at all, they're going to be small consequences. You're seeing in New York City looters not being charged after what happened last summer. The message is being sent out. You can do whatever you want. The police are outnumbered. They can't do much, if anything, to you if you are caught in your crimes. And so this is what happens when the inmates run the prison.
You know, I mean, Geraldo, it does feel like that. It feels like it's a little bit of a no-go zone in some of these places. You look at what's going on in Washington Square Park in New York, and, you know, let me put up the pictures of the two DAs. You've got Darcel Clark in the Bronx and Cyrus Vance Jr., who happens to be spending a lot of his focus on tax charges that he's trying to cultivate against President Trump. Meanwhile, though, they say, you know what, we're not going to prosecute what happened in the riots in New York City where people broke the windows, took all the merchandise out, ran away with it. They stole cars and, you know, drove them all around the city and, you know, perpetrated more crimes. Well, listen to this. This is Jessica Betancourt. She's a New York City business owner. Watch this.
I think it's just disgusting. It's outrageous the way we're getting treated. No one made an effort to even come to the stores and say, you know what, can I get some surveillance? Can I get some fingerprinting to see if we could catch these looters? No efforts were made by the city.
No efforts made by the city to prosecute any of these 400-some people, Geraldo.
Martha, that's the office where I began my legal career. My daughter Simone followed me in that New York DA's office. You know, they say they're overwhelmed with COVID cases because the courts were closed, and yet they're still investigating, as you mentioned, Trump on these lame tax charges. They're dropping other charges against the June 2020 looters. Why are they dropping those charges? Because the kids who stole and burned were protesting the death of George Floyd. I mean, that's absolutely baloney. You can't pick and choose. Laws must be upheld equally. Shame on the grown-ups who justify lawlessness. Those weren't protesters. They were crooks. You have all these deaths everywhere. There's a ghetto civil war. Murder is the #1 cause of death for young black men in America. It is the civil rights issue, Martha, of our time.
You know, if you don't prosecute these kinds of crimes, it simply sends the message that it's okay, right? You can do it. You can do whatever you want. And then you look at a different level of this, Washington Square Park in New York, and of course we've got a mayor's race ongoing here, and I don't know if there's any indication that anybody really has the spine to crack down on this. I guess we'll see what happens. But the people who are hanging out at these rave parties in Washington Square Park say, we're going to be here every single day, just like the police are. We are too, because this is as much our home as it is other residents have to live here. If you can't accept the fact that I'm living within my First Amendment constitutional rights, then, my friend, you're living in the wrong country, and democracy is not for you. They tried curfews in the park, Tomi, but none of that has worked to sort of restore some kind of, you know, peaceful environment in this part of New York. They have free reign.
And this isn't just the defund the police movement that we've seen over the last year and a half. This is also can be attributed to a lot of the policies on the book, a lot of the bad public policies. When you have felon coddling policies, when you have crime reclassification, when you have cashless bail, when you have reduced sentencing, of course, people are looking and saying, why can't I just do what I want? And then add on to that you can pass it off as justice, or you can get out of jail free card, quite literally, if you say that you are being oppressed or you are being in some way, this is a product of racism, then you feel as though you can do whatever you want. But it's not just happening in inner cities. It's not just happening in areas that were already rough neighborhoods. This is happening in Atlanta and places like Buckhead. This is coming to a city, a suburb near you, and people are going to start to understand what it looks like when social media hashtags become public policy. It's dangerous and reckless.
Yeah, I want to finish and get one last thought from you, Geraldo, if I may. This is James Craig, the former Detroit police chief, on Sunday morning with Maria, I believe. Watch this.
Okay, let me just start by saying that our profession is in a crisis right now. Some of the mayors in these cities are failing miserable. Let's look at Chicago. Lori Lightfoot talks about what's dangerous. The cops are dangerous? No, she's dangerous. We can talk about the failed leadership, but where's the support for the men and women? This anti-police rhetoric. It is not a surprise that police officers are leaving in large numbers.
Yeah. Geraldo, the support for the men and women is gone. And we all know that President Trump showed great support for law enforcement across this country. We also know that there have been some very tragic incidences that have happened across the country. But now you've got a situation where if they feel like nobody has their back, what do you think President Biden needs to say to law enforcement in this country?
That defund the police was the stupidest social movement of our time. To take the guns out of the hands of the cops or to take their community support away was appalling. You have now the opposite is happening, though. Martha, I see a comeback. The recruitment class and the police academy now over 14,000. It's a record. Many minorities are signing up. The community is coming back to the cops. Eric Adams, the former police captain, is the leading candidate in tomorrow's mayoral race. The people of New York have gone from defund the police and take $1 billion out of their budget to support the police. Law and order is the most important issue of this time, Martha.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right for this city and for cities across the nation, because this is out of control. Out of control. Thank God those two kids are okay. But I think that image should stay in everybody's mind across this country about how rampant and how, people feel like they can get away with whatever they want right now. Geraldo, thank you. Tomi, thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you both.